Thank you all for coming out. I'm Noreen Hersfeld. I'm the Reuter Professor of Science and Religion here at St. John's and St. Ben's, and it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Stephen Pope to you tonight. Stephen received his bachelor's degree from Gonzaga University in philosophy and theology, and then went on to get both a master's degree and a PhD from the University of Chicago. His PhD is in theological ethics. Fortunately for us, he's no stranger to Minnesota winters, having taught at the St. Paul Seminary and School of Divinity for 4 years. He's currently at Boston College, where he teaches courses on social ethics and theological ethics. He has published more than 90 articles and written or edited 6 books, including The Evolution of Altruism and the Ordering of Love, and Human Evolution and Christian Ethics. According to his website, he currently has 3 more books in process. Your Neighbor as Yourself, Relating Charity and Justice in Christian Ethics, Religion, Justice and Reconciliation, The Struggle for Peace with Justice, and The Fullness of Life, The Science of Well-Being, and The Ethics of Virtue. Steve, with all of that writing, I don't know how you found the time to come to us in Minnesota, but we're very glad you did. Now, he's currently out in New Jersey, where they just got a foot of snow yesterday, and Steve has fought 2 flight cancellations and a van cancellation, and he still valiantly made it here to be with us tonight. So while the weather might be awfully cold, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Dr. Stephen Pope.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Do you want to hear me? Nice to be here in Minnesota. You have to be nice to me. I'm a Patriots fan, and I'm depressed at our loss to Peyton Manning and his friends in Denver. So try to be altruistic to me, please. But it really is very nice to be here. I lived here for 4 years in Minnesota. I still maintain that Minnesotans are the nicest people in the country, and I feel that here, so I appreciate it. When you look at this question, what can Christian ethics learn from evolutionary examinations of altruism? That might seem like, who would ask that question to you? Or what does that even mean? But let's break it down a little bit. But let me start with the word evolution. What does the word evolution mean to you? When you hear that word, what's associations that come up into your mind? Don't think about it. Just tell me what words come to your mind. How about some hands? Apes? Biology? Science? Change? Charles Darwin? Good. Now we're going. Progress. Okay. Death? Suffering. Okay. Here's the philosophy department. Change over here from young people. Death. And the fact, natural selection, of course, those go together. Because in evolution, you have a selective process that takes place that says if you're not fit, what happens to you? Not only do you die, but what else dies? Your genes die. Ouch! It doesn't mean that your genes are dying in a different way. It means you're not going to replicate, you're not going to reproduce, you're not going to have descendants. And the ultimate payoff for evolution is what descendants do you have? Fitness is nothing to do with whether you look like Jesse Ventura or not. Fitness means reproductive success, or really even more broadly, something biologists call inclusive fitness. At least that's a theory of evolution, is inclusive fitness, which is that you benefit biologically, not just by having direct offspring, descendants, but also, or sometimes instead of, by helping other relatives, descendants, because the game is all about replicating copies of your genes. Now, the weird thing about that is that over generations, genes get thinner and thinner. They get more and more spread out. So it's not you that's being passed on. It's not you that is going to be in your relatives, but it's copies of your genes. That's pretty remote from who you are as a person. So when you think evolution, the normal thing for us to think about is there are winners and losers, reproductively speaking. And we can translate that often into there are people that are genetically superior than other people, which has very morally suspect overtones that kind of harken us back to when humanity was at its very worst with the Nazis. Some lives are not worthy of living. Some peoples can be subordinated for the good of our race. Some people that in this country we practiced sterilization on because they were considered mental defects. We practiced eugenics. And we practiced a really horrible way of thinking about what is the life of a human being worth. That's why it's often said that evolution and altruism are opposites. Evolution is about what's in it for you and your descendants. Altruism is about what? What does altruism mean? Loving another person. Loving another person. That's what it means to us. But what does altruism mean to a biologist?
Self-sacrifice.
Self-sacrifice. What kind of self-sacrifice? If a mother gets up in the middle of the night to care for her daughter who's got a fever because of the flu, is that self-sacrifice? She's really been tired. She's got 4 other kids. She's been running ragged. She's been shoveling the snow. You know, she's not feeling so great herself. Is she making a sacrifice to get up and care for her little baby daughter? What do you think?
That's it. She's prioritizing the child's needs over hers, so that way, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty sacrificial. What's her husband doing? He's lying in bed sleeping. I got to go to work in the morning. Yeah, but so do I. So self-sacrifice, in a sense, means what? It means that she's paid a cost. She's, in some way, willing to take the pain on herself of not getting enough sleep so that she can help a child because she, in a way, loves the child more than herself at that moment. Or maybe, in a way, she loves the child more than herself full out, all the time. Would a biologist say, given the notion of evolution we just talked about, that she's sacrificing herself for her child? You shook your head no. Why do you say no?
Because it's very little bearings on reproduction or replicating your genes.
Doesn't have a lot of bearings on her reproduction. She had 9 months, this little girl in her womb. She brought her into the world through a lot of pain and travail. She had the baby had colic. Now she's got she's got the flu and she's up crying in the middle of the night. What's a biologist going to say about her caring for that child? She's caring for this child because she's been genetically primed to have emotions of attachment to that child, supported by a hormone called oxytocin that makes her love and feel attached to that child and willing to care for that child at great cost to herself. From a cold clinical biological standpoint, this is a genetic investment. And she's gone this far with her genetic investment, she's not going to back out now. What you going to do, put her on the street? For the biologist, this is an investment. It's parental care. And it's called sometimes an example of kin altruism. Kin altruism is where you care for people that are genetically related to you. Why does kin altruism make evolutionary sense? If you have 2 groups of people, and one group of people have behavior in which they care for their offspring, and they care for their brothers and sisters, they care for their other relatives, and you have another group of people that don't care for their offspring, that don't care for their relatives, who do you think is going to be more reproductively successful over the long haul? The caring people or the non-caring people? The caring people, absolutely. If you don't care for your child and the child languishes and dies, what happens to your genes? They're dead. If you care for your children and they're reproductively successful, then they're alive. That's the game. So one way of talking about one way of talking about why would you have an evolutionary basis for altruistic traits is kin altruism. We think about this most of the time. The people that care the most for you, if you have a healthy family, is your family. We say blood is thicker than water. Now the question would be, if you care for your kids, your brothers and sisters, your nieces and nephews, is that really altruistic? Or have you done what they say evolutionists like to do, take the altruism out of altruism? Is it really altruistic for a mother to care for her child? What do you think? Or is it really just kind of a secret selfishness? What do you think? You don't have to insult your mothers here, okay? I'm not going to take it personally. No one's going to report you to your family. But what do you really think about that? What do you think? You're looking at me. Usually I pick on people that aren't trying to look away, but what do you think?
I think it depends on the family.
Depends on the family, yeah.
Because sometimes, like I just wrote down, I was going to ask you later, is kin altruism ultimately selfish just for the reproduction of your children?
Yeah. Now, no mother's going to think, I'm going to go help my child because I want to make sure my genes survive. That would be insane. But the point that the kin altruistic advocates would say is, we've evolved to have a certain emotional structure where we are more easily learning how to care for relatives than for strangers. We're primed to learn how to care. A mother especially is primed to learn how to care for a child. Fathers are a little bit more in need of training, let's say. And of course, all this is overlaid with culture. Some cultures are very father-involved. Some cultures are not very father-involved at all. So one way to deal with this is to say, well, there are two kinds of altruism. That's kind of the answer I'm trying to pull out of you. There are two kinds of altruism. There's moral altruism and there's biological altruism. Moral altruism is you're intending to help someone else. Not because you want to get something out of it, but just because you care about their situation. The word altruism came up not till the 19th century. Before that, we didn't even have the word, because the dominant view of human nature was we're all egotistical, not egotistical, but egoists. That is, we're all self-centered. We're all self-seeking. The person who wrote about this a lot was Thomas Hobbes. And that continues through the social contract understanding of government. Everybody's in it for themselves. Let's create a society in which we're least likely to kill each other in getting what we want. So you help me by getting out of my stuff. And I'll let you do what you do, and you can do whatever you want to do as long as you don't hurt me. So it's set up for an egoistic view of society. You can be altruistic if you want to, but it's to protect us against each other. So we have liberty as a major principle of our society. Probably freedom or autonomy is our biggest value. So to go back, altruism was coined because it said we're missing part of human nature, the part of us that's caring and connected to other people. And we can see that mostly in our own families, where people care for each other. Families also get really wacky and dysfunctional and hurtful to each other. But it becomes torturous when families are so damaging precisely because they're so important to us as a human race, as a human species, as what we are. Now, why would you care about somebody who's not a relative then? Forget about the genes. What's another reason for caring about people or for helping them when they're not your relative? Why do you help your roommate, assuming you help your roommate? It makes you feel good? Okay. Why does it make you feel good?
Internal values.
There's the values that you have, right? What else? What if it doesn't make you feel good to help your roommate? What if your roommate needs help with calculus and you really don't feel like helping her with calculus, but you do it anyway? Maybe you feel good because you suspended what you wanted to do to help her out. So there's an altruistic emotion. Sometimes we call it empathy. Empathy is an emotion that allows you to understand what another person's going through, to identify that person's inner state, the emotions they're feeling, the intentions they have, the motivations they have. Often we'll talk about compassion as a very positive approach to empathy. That is, you're responding to somebody and you care about them, so you want to help them. The Good Samaritan is an example of somebody that came along the road and helped somebody out of compassion. They were moved, not because they were a genetic relative, here's my cousin in the road, but actually they're from historical groups that hated each other, the Samaritans and the Jews. And it's the Good Samaritan that jarred the sensibilities of people at the time of Jesus, because the Samaritans are supposed to be bad guys and you're making the Samaritan into a good guy. So he was trying to confuse people's thinking and to get them out of their own ways of dividing the human race into the good and the bad, the righteous and the unrighteous, the insiders and the outsiders. But let's say the second thing I'm trying to get at here, why you'd be altruistic to non-relatives. It's not kin altruism. What is it that when your neighbor, yes, please. Could be for religious reasons, but what about just a common human way? Could be a means to an end. What end? I'm helping you because what? You need something from me. Exactly. That's called reciprocity. That's the second major theory of altruism, is reciprocity. Sometimes it's called reciprocal altruism. And it has two forms. One form is the direct form. Okay? Can I borrow your car? I got a hot date, and I'll let you use my cabin at the lake in 2 weekends. You could go ice fishing. That's a trading of benefits. It's reciprocity. A second version of reciprocity is indirect. That is, you're in a larger group of people. You don't necessarily have one-on-one contracts with everybody in the group, but you're working together as a group, and you want to know, should I help this person or not? Well, there are two things that that person can do with you when you offer to help. One is they can cooperate. The other is they can cheat you. They'll take your benefit, but they won't pay you back. Cheating. Sometimes it's called the problem of the free rider. It's a problem in any community. You have a common room in your dorm. Who's going to clean the dorm? Well, let's leave it up to people's goodwill. What does that usually mean? It means the nicest person, or the most conscientious person, or the person who's obsessive compulsive, or the person who really likes things neat is the one that winds up getting disgusted and cleaning it up, because they only have so much tolerance for mold on the dishes. So the problem of the commons is a famous problem about people that are self-interested acting in a way that destroys the common good that they all benefit from. Indirect reciprocity says that when you're in a group, you will know whether to cooperate with someone or to avoid them by one thing, primarily. Not their appearance, but what? Their reputation. Exactly. Their reputation. You can trust so-and-so because they're a good guy. Or she's cool. Or I was with her last night, she was really nice and she helped me with my problems. She was really attentive and listening. All of us would rather help people that are helpful than help people that are not helpful. That's a principle of reciprocity. So it might be that we've evolved as social creatures with a highly attuned sense of reciprocity. That is to say, we like to be able to compare how people are acting in relation to their reputations and in relation to what we need. I'll show you an example here. Oh, shoot, can I do that? Where's the tech man here? Actually, I can't do that. I'm sorry. I just realized it's on my computer. It's too late. I'll tell you about it. There's a famous primatologist named Franz de Waal. He works at Emory University. And de Waal has a famous experiment with capuchin monkeys in which he puts them side by side. You can look on this at YouTube. It's hilarious to look at. 2 capuchin monkeys. He's repeated this dozens and dozens of times. He has an experimenter. They're divided by a plastic partition. And there's an experimenter. Do you know the story? It's great. So the experimenter gives 1 piece of celery for a rock. Gives the rock to the monkey gives the rock back, they get a piece of celery. The next rock comes out to the other monkey, they get the rock, give the rock to the experimenter, they get a piece of celery. Now the capuchin monkey on the left side gets the celery again. Then he notices the one on the right side, instead of getting a piece of celery for a rock, gets a grape. The capuchin monkey sees this right off the bat, takes the celery, and throws it at the experimenter. They try it another iteration. The rock comes out of the slot, takes the rock, he pounds it against the glass, looks at it to make sure it's a genuine rock, gives it to the experimenter gives him a piece of celery, takes the thing, shakes it, throws it at the experimenter, then starts shaking the plexiglass. He's furious. Meanwhile, the other one's just calmly eating the grape and saying, "Thank you very much, bring it on." It shows that in some primates, there's a sense of fairness. Duvall calls it social inequity aversion, which is a very fancy scientific word for that's not fair. Fairness is a way of monitoring reciprocity. We see this as a core notion of our principle of justice that treats similar cases similarly. And we know we all have a sense when somebody who's in a similar situation is being treated unfairly, we call it discrimination. We can get outraged. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about the carrot cake that you have to divide up at home, or you're talking about the opportunities for jobs and education, where men get advantages women don't have, or black people are disadvantaged in a way over white people, which happens obviously pervasively. Or you're talking about looking at other cultures and thinking that doesn't seem fair to people that are subjected to those conditions when we're born in such a comfortable environment with lots of opportunities. So the second way that we talk about evolution and altruism is through reciprocity. Let me ask you again, is reciprocity a form of altruism? Is being good to somebody because they're going to be good to you altruistic in your opinion? No. How come?
Because it seems altruism would be doing something when you don't get something in return.
Altruism is when you don't get something in return. So that girl that cleans the common room when her roommates won't clean it up, who's really taking herself an hour to clean that place, and she would rather be reading a novel, but she takes the time to do this. She's not altruistic. She's actually being selfish. Is that what I'm hearing? Because her other roommates are going to go say, "Please, be more selfish. Make my bed. Do my laundry."
No, she's being altruistic because she's not getting something in return.
She is getting something in return, though. What's she getting? Or is she? She's getting clean, so she's less annoyed. She's helping herself. That would make it egoistic, self-serving behavior. So doesn't it depend on her motivation? It depends. Human altruism depends on our motivation. Is she cleaning because she's saying, "I want my friends to have a clean environment so none of us get poisoned"? Or is she saying, "I want to have this clean because I want my boyfriend to come over and not think I'm a total slob"? Or is she thinking, cleanliness is next to godliness, so I need to clean this place up because it's ungodly? Or is she doing this because I don't want my friends to think that we're all pigs and it's disgusting? Or is she doing it because her self-image is such that she thinks of herself as an orderly person and she can't stand being surrounded in junk? She just feels ugh about it. It's relief of distress. Some people get very distressed by a mess. Other people doesn't bat an eye. It's not always gender related either, although it seems like there's a certain proclivity here. I think men tend to be less bothered by order, but I'm not sure about that. The complicating factor is that our motives are usually mixed. We don't usually have one motive. So when you use the word altruism or egoism and say that's the only choice, it paints you into an impossible psychological situation. Because oftentimes behaviors are both altruistic and they're egoistic. They can be intending to serve other people, but also happy you're doing it because it's going to bring you a benefit as well. So it's mixed. But if the motivation is to get something back from someone, is primary. If you could say that motivations are ranked, which is often the kind of strategy people in ethics will use, we have ranked motivation. If the motivation is primarily help another person, even though it's going to bring you a benefit and you know it, then it's altruistic. It's also possible for reciprocity then to be either altruistic or egoistic. That's kind of where I want to go with that. Now, if we just read, there's other theories as well, but if we can just pare it down, what do you think loving your family and loving your friends, and let's say by extension your group, because the other form of altruism that I don't have that much time to talk about because we've got about 11 minutes here. Loving the group is also said by some evolutionists to be a form of altruism, group-directed altruism, group-selected altruism. Because the argument is that a group that has altruistic members competing with another group that does not have as altruistic members is going to be more reproductively successful than the less altruistic group. That's called the theory of group-selected altruism. But the problem is, in an altruistic group, if you get a cheater in the group, they can exploit the group very well. They bore right into it, and they can take advantage of people because you have a bunch of helpers. So the evolutionary tack here is to say the best altruistic groups are the ones that punish the most. This sounds odd. Altruistic groups need to punish because otherwise they'll be destroyed by defectors and cheats. It doesn't mean you have to punish harshly, but it means you have to watch what people do and make sure that you reward people that cooperate and you punish people that cheat. Now the punishment can be harsh and retributive and mean, which personally I think is what defines our prison system. Or it can be rehabilitative and corrective. That is, it can be a kind of punishment that helps people get back into the cooperating mode instead of drive them deeper into the cheating mode. It cannot be retaliatory. It could be retaliatory, but it also can be humane. There's a big spectrum in between, of course. This is big picture. Now let's go to Christian ethics. What does Christian ethics have to do with the evolution of traits that lead us to want to be fair, to want to reciprocate, to cooperate with cooperators, to punish cheats, and to love our families, to love our communities, to love our groups? Is Christianity at odds with those evolutionary strains of human nature? Let's just posit, because there's a lot of complicated debates about these. Let's just posit if those are part of our nature. There's some reason to think they are. What does Christianity do with that? Does it say yes, no, maybe? What does it say about those two things? Kin altruism, or let's say kinship, and reciprocity. Yes?
Christian ethics takes its locus from Leviticus 19, and so...
Wait. You have to explain to our friends what that means.
Leviticus 19 is...
Love your brother.
Is the core to the holiness code, which starts off at the beginning with a vertical ontology between God and self. It then expands to loving your parents, which is like verse 3. Then it expands to loving your kin and your tribe, which is like verse 17, roughly. It then jumps. It makes a categorical leap in verse 18 to loving your neighbor, which is beyond your kinship. And then it extends itself to verses 33 and 34 to loving the stranger, the alien. So it includes your kin altruism. And by extension, in terms of Christian ethics, you have the love of neighbor, which then in Matthew 5:43 to 48 gets extended to love of enemy. So it involves this, but there's certain attributes both to the Leviticus holiness code and to Christ's sort of precepts that push beyond your kinship.
Okay. You're not an undergraduate, are you?
No.
I was going to say, that's the smartest undergraduate I've ever heard. No, that was great. That was fantastic. So Deuteronomy says you must love God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. Right? And Leviticus, this is back in the Pentateuch, Leviticus says you must love your neighbor as yourself. Then it spells out the meaning of neighbor. And I'll give you one example of, I'm going to blast through. This is what we've been talking about. This is kin altruism. This is a mother chimp helping a baby chimp stuck in a tree. You ever been there? I've been there. It's no fun. And she's helping out. This is the proportion of genes we share with our relatives. You can see this. You all know this. Sure. Reciprocity. This is the Duval. That's the Duval experiment with fairness. This is the picture I want to get at. What's this from? It's from a movie that's out right now that's up for a bunch of awards. 12 Years a Slave. I highly recommend this movie. But don't go looking for like a knee snap lapping kind of entertaining thing. It's not a date night. It's just a really profound, moving, agonizing movie to watch. But it will open your eyes in a way. For me, I was deeply moved by this. And I didn't learn anything new about slavery I didn't already know. But the story hits you in the heart. It really does. One particular person's story, based upon a true story. But this is an example of extreme in-group altruism and out-group exploitation. What do you think that phrase means? In-group altruism. What's altruistic about that? Nothing. But how is that related to in-group altruism? What does in-group altruism mean? We're Johnnies, not Tommies. Isn't that what you guys say? We're Americans. You care for your own. How often have you heard people say, when you get to be as old as I am, you've heard it a lot, he's not like us. He's not one of us. She's weird. She's a freak. They're not like us, so you can do with them what you want. When I moved to Boston, which I love the city, a lot of great people, but I was at a party the first week I was there. Boston's known for racial tensions. Actually, every American city pretty much is known for racial tensions. Boston had the busing crisis in the 70s. I was at a house in a three-story, three-family, working-class neighborhood. We were sipping our punch. There was a big fire in Roxbury, which is an African-American neighborhood. A mother was poor. She had to leave the oven door open because she couldn't afford to pay the heating bill. The apartment caught on fire. She died, and 3 of her children died. At the party, one of the people I was with, a white person, said, Roxbury, African Americans, said, you know, those people don't love their children the way we do. It's one of the most horrible things I've ever heard in my life. They don't love their children the way we do. I heard an American GI in a Dunkin' Donuts standing next to me in line tell me what he learned from his tours in Iraq is that Muslims don't love their families the way Americans do, the way we do. And it sounds too idiotic to think somebody would think that, but he said, I didn't go there thinking that. That's what I learned. And I cut him some slack because if you're being shot at by a bunch of people, it's pretty much natural to have a prejudice against the whole group. Your amygdala's going crazy. And you're super literally fired up. But the danger of in-group altruism is it can breed out-group exploitation. And one of the key deep strains of the Hebrew Bible is a struggle over in-group altruism that's inclusive or in-group altruism that's exclusive and exploiting. The occupation of the land of Canaan was not a let's go share and be friends. It was basically described the language we would use to describe some of the occupation and the takeover in some of the books of the Hebrew Bible pretty much amounts to genocide. Certainly ethnic cleansing. At the same time, you have this notion of the neighbor is someone, the stranger is someone who you should be hospitable to. That we have a debt because the person coming to you could be an angel, as it's described in the Genesis description of Abraham. There's a reverence for hospitality in the Middle East today that's extremely deep and profound. That they pride themselves on being good to strangers who they welcome into their homes and open their hearts to. The Iranians are some of the most hospitable people in the world. You never hear that in our press, because that's another one of those in-group, out-group things. So the question is, does Christianity contribute to the problem of out-group exploitation, or do they provide a corrective to the problem? To what extent does Christianity aggravate? Well, we hear about that a lot. We hear a lot of times religion is the cause of all evil from some people. Steven Pinker, for example, would be a person in this, or the new atheists. Jonathan Haidt, a whole bunch of people think religion is really, really almost demonic. On the other side, what's to say in favor of Christianity? What about Christianity would challenge out-group exploitation? What about it is against this kind of thing? Standing for social justice? Okay. Where does that come? Jesus never says stand for social justice. I want you to go picket Safeway. When I was a kid, we used to picket Safeway because they were buying grapes from people that didn't support the United Federation of Farm Workers. Jesus doesn't say go protest, go get in the street. But you're right, I have another example here of somebody who's very caring. He's not out leading protests. The core of social justice is love, the word agape. Agape is often contrasted with eros, which is the love of desire. I'm getting what's good for me. That's really kind of a vulgar, low level, I'd call it a crappy eros, immature eros. True eros is an elevation and a self-transcendence into the good. It's a transformation of desire. And it's also, agape is often contrasted with philia, which is love of friendship, which is mutuality. And it has an element of reciprocity. But real friendship isn't about trading benefits. It's about wanting to care for your friend because you love your friend for his own sake, her own sake. So agape, in a way, transcends reciprocity to go beyond reciprocity. It doesn't mean it denies reciprocity, but it means life is more than reciprocal trading. That's the start. Just like when you start, you want to date somebody, someday most of you are going to be married. It doesn't start off with thinking, if you'd run the other way if somebody says, let's get married. It starts off with physical attraction, emotional attraction to somebody. The reason relationships last is different from the way that they start. There has to be a much deeper sense of who you are as a human being for it to last. So agape, you could say, in Christian ethics, I'll go one more minute because there's a lot more to talk about this, but I want to hear questions. Agape can be understood as the transformation of all love by grace. The transformation of all love by grace. Grace is God's love for us. And it works in and through everything that's human. The basis for this is the Christian belief in the incarnation. That God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. That God became human in Jesus. The Word became flesh. And in doing that, assumed all of our human desires and core desires, our needs, everything about us, he says, is possible to become loving, to become filled with grace, to become oriented to what we really are as human beings. So that means that in Christian ethics, my belief in Christian ethics is that Christian ethics transforms reciprocity and kinship. It doesn't erase them. It doesn't say that they're terrible because they're just selfish. It even transforms self-love. And I think one of the things that people need to hear in our society is that there's a big difference between selfishness and real self-love. If you think about what makes people the most happy the most fulfilled, it's almost always in caring for other people, in taking joy in other people, in spending time with people that they see are good and beautiful, who make them feel good about who they are as a human being. Grace is operating in those modes. And it can work in friendship, and it can work in love of strangers. It can work in love of enemies. It can work in love of friends. So it's working within the evolutionary capacities we've been given to direct them in the right way. Okay? So the core idea I want to get across is that if we say that grace works with and heals and directs our nature in the right way, then love in a Christian context is attempting to do that, to serve others in love, and in doing that, find fulfillment. Okay? I'm going to give one last slide, and then I'll open it up for questions, because I want to go back to this question of social justice. I love this picture. This is from 1965. Anybody know where this took place? It's a famous bridge, not in Brooklyn. Selma, 1965. And there's a protest march being led by, of course, Martin Luther King Jr., which I put here in part because his day was Monday, but also other civil rights leaders working together in an interreligious context. So this is the Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. If you ever want to be inspired, read Heschel's writings. When he talks about, especially he talks about faith as radical amazement, a capacity for amazement, to see the good in your life and to embrace it and to love it. But Ralph Shuttlesworth, John Lewis here was a congressman, and then a Catholic nun. It's the only one that doesn't have a name on here. But that said a lot about those days when priests and nuns would put their body on the line for social justice. When they moved, they saw that agape isn't just individual and interpersonal. Agape has to be social and working through justice. Okay, I'll stop there, and then let's see what questions or comments you guys have. Don't be shy. Yes?
Could it be said that Christian altruism is because we want to get to an idea of an afterlife?
Did I say that?
No.
Okay.
Could it be said that the reason for Christian altruism is to get to heaven afterlife?
Do you all hear the question? So the philosopher David Hume, famous Scottish philosopher, said the problem with Christians and Christian ethics is that it's basically selfish. Because it tells people if they're good, they get to go to heaven. So it reinforces people in their selfishness. What do you all think about that critique of Christianity? Is he right or not? It's what?
It's definitely hard to refute from.
Really, I could. Maybe not to his satisfaction,
Yeah.
but it maybe not.
From a philosophical standpoint, it is hard to say that, because you can't know what anyone's, to truly know what someone's justifications and reasons are for doing something, it's really hard to say. You can basically point the finger at anyone and go, well, you're just being selfish.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to defend yourself against that.
Yes. Is the motive? Is Christianity about getting to heaven? It depends on who you ask? Okay. What's your sense? Do you think Christianity is about going to heaven?
No, but I think that Christianity is something that can be argued, and I mean, your interpretation of it is your interpretation of it. So some
Okay.
people's interpretation of it may be that they just want to get to heaven.
Yeah. I'm sure it is. My mother-in-law one time told me, God bless her memory, my mother-in-law once told me, she was a very nice person, but she goes, we were out and she had a drink or two before dinner and a moment of honesty in the backyard on a July night in Chicago, and she says, I'd be a lot worse person if I didn't fear that I'd go to hell for doing the stuff that I'd like to do to people. I thought, geez, excuse me, little old lady seems so nice. I'm thinking of her fantasizing poisoning the neighbors or something, and then I thought, wait a minute, maybe she wants to poison me. I stole her daughter and took her to Boston. Think about Christianity as relationship. Christianity as relationship. Heaven is a place in our imagination, and it's a change of geography. So saying I'm going to be good to go to heaven is like saying I'm going to be good so that I can go to Paris on my spring break. Is it really just a change of locations? Or is heaven about relationship? I mean, if it is, what does that mean? What does heaven have to do with relationship? Did you have an answer?
Well, I mean, I was just going back to when we were talking more so about doing good actions to go to heaven. And, you know, for a lot of Christians, you know, there's a big difference between acts and faith, and what is it that saves. Paul was a big proponent for, you know, it's not, you know, we can't save ourselves. And he said in his letters, he would talk, and in Acts, he would talk about how it's not us that can save ourselves and our actions,
Mm-hmm.
but more so our Christ.
So you think about Paul says faith is what justifies. Talking about this in Galatians and Romans, faith is what justifies us, but it's faith active in love. We think about what did Paul say when sometimes we think about the word faith and it means I believe X, Y, and Z. Go to Mass, I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, etc., etc. You're rattling things off like saying I believe that Louis XIV was once the King of France. It's facts, propositions, details about the world. But another understanding of faith is that faith is basically a relationship, and it's about being related to God in a relationship of trust. It's about accepting what God says because you trust God, because you see God's goodness. So in that way, instead of faith being, I'm going to say these things so I can get what God gives me, it's, I trust and love God, so I want that relationship to be important to me. That's what prayer is, right? It's a dialogue with God. It's about relationship with God. In that case, heaven isn't something that you go to after you finish life. Heaven is about the culmination of the love of God in eternal love of God. So you can think about this life for someone like Paul, and I think in a deep sense, it's a Christian way of thinking about this. Heaven is having somebody, heaven is an image people use, because we have to have images, and images are always going to be flawed and messed up. They're always going to be short, so you have to make sure you don't take them literally. But it's about how do we deepen, think of yourself loving someone and saying, I want to be closer to that person. I want to be with that person. I want to know them better. A really good example of this is when you fall in love with somebody, and they happen to have a job that's 100 miles away. Or they're going to a school, you're going to St. John's, and they're going to school in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and you really miss them. And you want to spend time with them, and there's a yearning to be with them. And when you are with them, the word for that is joy. Heaven, I think, is a bad idea, a bad image, because it sounds geographical. But what we really should be talking about is eternal joy, eternal bliss, which is being with the people that you love the most forever. And not having to separate, not having to break, not having to be missing them, and feeling yourself living the fullness of life there. So, if you think about it that way, we want to act in our lives in a loving way because it's the only way we can be in a good relationship with God and a good relationship with ourselves. So you can reverse it and say, we are only ourselves, really ourselves, when we're most loving. We're only ourselves when we're most loving of our neighbor, and we're most loving of ourselves, and most loving with God. So it's not deferred happiness, it's happiness to some extent right here and now. It's living love right now. as much as you possibly can. That's why St. Paul, your friend, talks about Christian life is a life of joy now. It's not life sucks, then you die, and then, oh, I get joy in heaven. It's I get joy now and with God for all eternity. Now sometimes, in fact, life is very horrible for people. Life is very, very hard. It's hard for all of us. It's extraordinarily hard for some people through no fault of their own. And you could say in those moments, it's an important consolation for them to know that there's a better life and a better existence that God is going to bring them into once they pass this life. So I actually don't want to poo-poo that entirely. Because for many people, it's a source of hope that I know there's a goodness in life that's more than I see. I know there's a love and there's a life that's beyond the fact that my son has cancer, or the fact that my dad died at 40 on a ski slope. I'm talking about myself. I have a student that this happened to, died at 40 years old on a ski slope. Freshman year, 1 week into college, boom, phone call. Got to come home. Or to say, I know, I volunteer in a prison in Massachusetts. I've been there for about 5 years. And it's the holiest group of people I know. It sounds weird, but 12 guys, most of whom are in for murder. And they're living 4 walls and bars. And their view is, I know there's a God because of being able to get out of my addiction. I don't have to wait to die to go to hell because I was in hell already on the streets, they'll say. And I know there's a heaven because I can taste it here because I see it in the love of my brothers for me. Redemption doesn't happen after you die only. It can happen in this life. But the key is you have to be open to love. Okay, there's another question? Jennifer. Yeah.
And I guess I also would say it not to just be saints, but in my 11 years with undergraduates, I've witnessed moments where undergraduates can be, they're so altruistic in their compassion and love for others, even if they don't even know them very well. And I can give lots of examples, but I won't do that. But my sense is it's not about feeding their ego. It seems like it's this genuine love, and it causes them to go outwards and do things for people out of that love, and many people who are not even Christian, experience. So I guess I've become convinced that human beings, that we probably, many people in this room can identify a moment where they felt that, and it hasn't been about their ego. So I'm wondering, how do they explain this weird altruism, agape?
Yeah. So,
When it's really good.
yeah. So first of all, I can't speak for evolutionary scientists because I'm a theologian. I had one course in science in college, and I took that pass-fail. So I'm not a model. I can't speak for anybody in sciences. But what I would say is, to me, the evolutionary analysis of altruism is to real full-fledged altruistic love is the way an alphabet is to reading Shakespeare. You can know all of the alphabet and not understand a word of Shakespeare. Biological underpinnings give us building blocks, and only building blocks. They give us emotional tendencies that are always filtered through culture. So biology is some, culture is a lot. And I would say, you all know about Dorothy Day, I hope, and Dorothy Day is the founder of the Catholic Worker and the soup kitchens many of them started in New York City. a person who is a fascinating human being who, as a young woman, was an atheist, was sort of in the Communist Party, had a lover, had a child, had an abortion, had a child out of wedlock, and in having the child, she experienced this building momentum, leading her to want to thank God for this great gift of goodness in her life, and converted to Catholicism, and then left a career in journalism and opened a soup kitchen in the Bowery during the Depression, or in the wake of the Depression, and is a great model of love and caring. She's actually really interesting from the point of view of kin selection because she was kind of tough on her daughter. It's tough to have a mom who runs a soup kitchen. You know? It's like, Mom, I want to go to the Girl Scouts. You know, we got to go get potatoes from this place and start cooking them because guys are going to be here in 2 hours and there's no food. They're going to be hungry on the street. So kind of suck it up here. Or Mom's in a Greyhound bus going from place to place trying to hold together Catholic worker communities while Tamar's back trying to learn English and French at a school in New York. It was really hard for her. I think there's no answer to your question other than to say culture has a profound influence on Dorothy Day, especially the culture of Catholicism. She was a very, very devout, church-going, praying Catholic. And I think from a theological standpoint, we have to say the Holy Spirit was involved in the life that she led. But there's also an element of her experience of joy in serving other people. That her working in the soup kitchen sometimes made her depressed, but sometimes it inspired her, it elevated her. Mother Teresa used to suffer from depression. You can see it in her journal. And especially she writes about a sense of this spiritual isolation and aridity, that God isn't really present to her. And what she would do to find joy and happiness, to get herself back in the groove, is she would go out to the streets and find people that were dying and bring them into the home she was running. She says, when I feel so low by myself, I get out of it by going out and serving other people. That's an amazing thing about human beings. That actually there's a certain kind of therapeutic value in caring for other people and not just caring for yourself. So, as far as undergrads go, what you just said I think is really important. I've been teaching at BC now for 25 years. And I've learned a lot from students. I have a very strong impression that your generation of students, and the students I've been teaching at BC for a long time, have a big wide range of people that are very self-centered, and of people that are very other-centered and giving and caring, and people in between. Most of us are in between. I think there's an idealism about being a human being, that we do get joy from other people. The biggest problem is the language we have in our culture tends to be very individualistic, tends to be very me-centered. The music, the movies, the sports, all of which I love, enjoy, hit us over and over again with a I think kind of a cynical message. That everybody's out for themselves. You have to be competitive. You have to get what you can get while you can get it. And then happiness is getting what you want. It's very me-centered. And I think the sad part about that is we also have a lot of people in your generation in college that I teach are very lonely people. And you can be lonely in a crowd. You can be lonely in a group of people where you feel like people don't really understand who you are, or the people won't let you be who you really are. And it can be for a lot of different reasons. How do we overcome the impoverished nature of our public language in our society? I think the key is to find communities of people that can show you that there's a better way to live. A small group of people. That could be your friends. They could be people at a Catholic worker kitchen like we've talked about. It can be getting involved in peace and justice action campaigns on campus. It can be campus ministry. There are a lot of things you can do that you can find like-minded people. But I've had 3 kids go through Boston College. And I know a lot of their friends. And they've all found the same experience. And I'm sure it's not unique to BC. the feeling that there's something unsatisfying about their way they're living, but they don't quite know what to do about it. And I think the reason it's so unsatisfying is the more centered we are on ourselves, the less satisfied we're going to be. So we have to find an avenue out of that. Another question? Yes?
I'll make it quick. I don't have a personal stance on this at all, but in the beginning you talked a lot about biological kinship, and I was wondering if you could give your thoughts on how to explain adoption and who's being altruistic, the adopted mother who might just be filling the need of having children, and then how would you explain that? Or the birth parents who give the child up, either if they out of love, and then is that altruistic, or if they don't want the kid, how do you explain that biological, I guess, anomaly of not wanting the children?
So first of all, I hope you don't think I'm saying that evolution can explain these things.
Right.
Remember the alphabet and Shakespeare, right? So there's a difference between human behavior and the building blocks. I haven't studied adoption, so I really can't say much about that. But what I want to say is, I wouldn't assume that people give a child up for adoption don't want the kid. They may didn't Juno happen in this state after all? It might be that they feel that they're unable to care for this child. They love the child, right? And because they love the child, they want to give the child up for adoption because they want what's best for the child, right?
Right. So if you connected, I guess, to Christianity and explain this like feeling of connecting with others, helping others, and then you look, I mean, I'm bringing it up because when you bring up biological kinship, it's like the most extreme form of how you explain altruism.
Yeah.
And then you have something like adoption where people don't just do it, or maybe they do just do it to help others.
Yeah.
And then how do you explain that from a Christian standpoint? And I guess I'm just curious about your thoughts.
Yeah,
Like I
well,
said, I don't have a personal
I'll just
stance.
completely winging this. I would say that I think people have a desire, most people have a desire for a family. And either they can, I'm trying to think of a couple of cases I know. I know of a family that had 2 biological children, but they wanted to share their resources with people that are less advantaged, and they wanted to open their homes and their hearts to people that were less advantaged, particularly. So they went to Thailand and they adopted 3 children and brought them into their home and made them their family. They asked them into their lives and wanted to share their lives with them. So I actually think it's exactly so adoption can be done for different people for different reasons, right? There isn't just one explanation. But I think it's possible, and the people I've seen that have adopted have been really kind of, I would say, mirroring the way in which God works in the world, or the reason God made the world. God made the world to share God's love with what is not God. So God opens up this space called creation to fill with love and to bring us back to God. The people that I know that have adopted have wanted to bring people into a sphere of love. And they knew that, of course, when you bring people into love, they return that love, so it enriches your life. And I think one of the things about egoism, altruism language that's very, very destructive is that it constantly forces you to choose. Either it's for you or it's for the other. Whereas I think real love at its peak, at its best, at its most real, is always win-win. When I love you more and you love me more, both of our lives are expanded. When a couple invites a child into its life, the child is loved and benefits, and the parents benefit from loving as well as being loved. One other thing about I only use the word altruism because it's the common use in the environment, in the ecological, the evolutionary language. The core of Christian love is based upon God's love. God's love is God's happiness. God's complete flourishing is in loving. Our happiness is first and foremost in being loved by God but not in being loved by other people, but in loving other people. There's a big difference if you think that my happiness is other people loving me. What that often will mean is, how can I act in a way that gets people to love me? And we're all of you are at a good school. You're all good at performing. You're all good at showing, look what I can do with the SATs or the ACT. Look what I can do with sports. Look what I can do with student government. Look what I can do with drama. Look what I can do with chemistry. And that's all great. But the danger of performance is you often forget who you are. Or you think, I have to perform in order to be lovable. I have to perform so that people will love me. I have to make them think I'm good at something to be loved. Whereas in fact, real happiness isn't in getting people to love you, but really it's in loving yourself. There's a great freedom. That's why St. Paul, your buddy, says, love fulfills the law. It fulfills everything God wants from us, to really genuinely love other people. That make sense? Question? Love is inexhaustible, you know, I mean, but you're not. Okay? I think I won.